truth about adversity. There was once an individual who refused to be discouraged. One thing after another in his human affairs went wrong, as the saying is. One disaster after another came upon him, apparently unjustly and through no fault of his own. But no matter what happened, he kept his poise. In fact, his manner of dealing with each seeming adversity was such that he actually succeeded in turning it into a blessing, not only to himself, but to all with whom he was associated. He evidently had unshakable faith in the ultimate triumph of right, this Hebrew lad Joseph of long ago, whom the compelling hand of love took from feeding his father's sheep to make of him the greatest influence for good in what was at that time the most powerful kingdom in the world. No matter how acute the condition became, he evidently made no complaint. No matter how hopeless the situation might seem, his courage did not fail. He simply trusted God and did the best he could. It is a beautiful story and vibrant with interest to the Christian Scientist today, for it illustrates how every adverse circumstance, if taken rightly, can be turned into a new opportunity to prove the truth of the scriptural saying that all things work together for that love God. Did his brethren, inflamed with envy and jealousy, cast him into a pit in the wilderness? It all worked together for good, for he was presently sold to merchantmen and carried into Egypt, which brought him just that much nearer to the great work of his life. True, he was only a slave there, but that did not dishearten him. All things were still working together for good, and he quietly went about his business, doing the best he could. The sudden transition from his simple home in the land of Canaan to the house of Potiphar, the rich Egyptian, did not confuse him nor rob him of his poise. He performed the duties required of him in his master's household, undisturbed by the fact that he was a captive in an alien land and untouched by the gross materiality about him. This same fidelity of purpose, this same integrity of thought and conduct, which had so aroused the hatred and envy of his brethren, once more enraged the carnal mind, and impersonal evil found a new channel through which it hoped to accomplish his downfall. On a false accusation, he was thrown into prison. There is no record, however, that he indulged in self-pity, self-righteousness, resentment, or bitter condemnation. Nor did he spend precious time in bemoaning his fate, so far as we know. He still believed in his God, and that all things were still working together for good. Did it seem to human sense that his usefulness was over, that his work had been taken from him? Not so. The work he had been doing had undoubtedly been taken from him, but that only meant that another work was just beginning. If he could no longer do the big things for his master, which he had been doing so faithfully and well, he could still do little things for his fellow prisoners, and do them just as faithfully and just as well. Perhaps he had already learned that it is not the size of the things done which counts so much as the spirit in which they are done. We know the rest of the story, how he was finally brought forth by one whom he had befriended in the prison to interpret a dream for the great Pharaoh himself, which so pleased the king that he was set free and placed in a position whereby he was able, by his wisdom and sagacity, to save countless thousands from hunger or starvation, among them his own father and his traitorous brethren. And how graciously he forgave his brethren, and pointed out to them that all things are in God's hand, even in the darkest hours of our lives. There was a perfect plan to be wrought out, and he and they were just a part of it. Be not grieved, he told them tenderly, nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. Well for us today, if in the midst of seeming affliction we may echo these words, that it was not you that sent me hither, but God, thus establishing the eternal truth that the wrath of man shall praise him. For we sometimes feel as if Joseph were not the only one who was ever sold into Egypt, a helpless victim of envy, revenge, treachery, and cruelty. Yet we are told in miscellaneous writings by our beloved leader, Mary Baker Eddy, that whatever envy, hatred, revenge, the most remorseless motives that govern mortal mind, whatever these try to do, shall work together for good to them that love God. Each stage of human experience through which Joseph passed proved to be essential to the next step in his progress, and all were without exception along the line of spiritual advancement, although they appeared at the time to be exactly the opposite. If he had not been thrown into the pit, he would never in all probability have reached the land of Egypt. If he had never reached the land of Egypt, he would never have dwelt in Potiphar's house and incurred the enmity of one of its inmates. If this enmity had not occurred, he would not have been thrown into the prison in disgrace. And if he had not been placed in prison, he would not have known one of its inmates, a fellow companion in misery, who afterwards, upon being released and restored to favor, remembered Joseph and was the direct cause of his being brought before Pharaoh. If Pharaoh's attention had not thus been called to him, he would not have had the opportunity so to prove his wisdom beyond that of all the king's astrologers and soothsayers, that he was exalted to the highest rank and power. And if he had not possessed this rank and power, he could not have been in a position to make a decree whereby not only Egypt, but other nations were saved from 7 years of famine, nor have brought about a reconciliation between himself and his brethren. Like a continuous golden thread, the omnipotence of good runs through the entire fabric of his various experiences, linking the different parts together into a complete whole. The poet Browning caught some vision of this divine continuity when he wrote, "On the earth, the broken arcs; in heaven, a perfect round." The limited range of human vision can see only the broken arcs of the circle, the bits, the pieces, the detached portions, so to speak, of the entire plan, the perfect round. But when we come to see more as God sees, we realize that each and every one was needed in order to make manifest that which was an established fact in mind before the morning stars first sang together in joy. One sometimes hears it said, "But why should all this come upon me? Why do I have all this trouble when I'm trying so hard to do right?" Joseph was trying to do right too, and yet it did not save him from the pit and the dungeon. Daniel was trying to do right, and yet he had to go into the lion's den. They were just new opportunities to prove in what direction their trust lay. whether in the omnipotence of good or in the boasted power of evil. It is safe to say that there is hardly a person in the world today who does not at times feel he has something to forgive. Perhaps even yet, strive as one may, a certain face comes back again and again upon his mental vision, or a certain set of circumstances which he would fain forget intrudes itself upon his harmony. If so, let him find comfort in pondering the story of this man of long ago, who accepted adversity so well and trusted God so completely, even under the greatest stress of circumstances, that the wonder and the inspiration of it have come down to us through the lapse of all these dusty centuries. Unpleasant and unjust and trying experiences come to every one of us, and they are easily accounted for, because as Christian scientists we are constantly going against the current of popular thought. And when one rows his boat upstream and against the current, he encounters more obstacles and goes more slowly than the one who is idly drifting downstream. But to float along with popular opinion and established precedent is not to grow. Instead, let us say with the apostle, "None of these things move me." Not one of these things should shake our trust in God and his perfect plan, which as yet we may discern but faintly, but in which every one of us belongs. We must trust him with these broken arcs, these seemingly unattached incidents of daily experience, and realize that even though we may seem to be cast into the deepest pit of loneliness, fear, and despair, all things are still working together for good. Love will never leave us comfortless, and already a friendly hand, yet unseen by us, may be reaching out towards us in the darkness. Do some of us feel that we are already slaves to wrong environment, held in subjection to materiality, placed in the stifling atmosphere of surroundings not conducive to spiritual growth and development, a veritable prison house of limitation, thwarted effort, discouragement, frustration? These are only bringing new opportunities to prove that God is all in all, to trust more, to forgive more, to see the perfect man where sense testimony would see an imperfect mortal, to maintain the impersonality of evil, and to ask ourselves the question which Mrs. Eddy presents in Miscellaneous Writings: do we yet understand how much better it is to be wronged than to commit wrong? Then let us praise God for these lessons in patience, humility, unrequited service, unappreciated effort, hope deferred, forgiveness, charity, unself-love. Suffering sense can see only the present moment with its false conclusions drawn from material finite testimony. But let it be ever remembered that what is termed material sense can report only a mortal, temporary sense of things, whereas spiritual sense can bear witness only to truth, as Mrs. Eddy states in Science and Health with key to the Scriptures. O thou afflicted, tossed with tempest and not comforted, dry those unavailing, useless, unworthy tears, and look up. Lift your thought above man's inhumanity to man, to realize more of the dear Father's great universal love and his care for everything: the flowers, the stars, the birds, the little lambs asleep, the baby leaves just uncurling in the April sun. Would his love enfold all these in tenderest care, and yet forget you, his dear child? The hour will surely come when you will look back upon this present experience, which now seems so hard and cruel and unjust, and realize that it was really a blessing in disguise, in that it compelled you to loose your hold upon human help and turn more unreservedly to God as the supreme power, the one great all in all. You will at length realize that had it not come, you might not have so quickly reached the higher point of vision whereon you stand today. And as you look back upon it and see how much it taught you, and how far along the heavenly way you are because of it, your heart will silently sing for joy, and you will find yourself whispering as to someone very near,